Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
But outside of that, only very few people knew that Naruto was the son of the fourth Hokage. As Hirusen did not want anyone to know this, as he thought that could Naru in yet more danger than he was already in. But because the people of the village knew about the fox inside Naruto, people were afraid and wanted him out of the village. And some would even ask to sacrifice the child, which was making the third Hokage have many problems and didn't know what to do. In addition, Danzo was talking to the village elders to leave Naruto in their care, hiding his existence from the village. However, Hirusen did not want to do that. But on the other hand, by this time, the news of the death of the fourth Hokage had already spread all over the world, and Hirusen Jiraiya already knew this, so, unable to believe what he had heard, he had left for his village. But at the same time, Tsunade also knew that if the news of the death of the fourth Hokage were true, the village could be in problems, besides knowing that it would be something hard for Jiraiya. Therefore, Suande, along with Shizune, would also set out for the Leaf Village. Likewise, Orochimaru, upon hearing this news, would be happy, since Minato had won him the position as Hokage. And knowing that the village was not at its best, he would also set off towards him, hoping to meet Danzo and try to take the village. And so after this it would be a week by this time. Jiraiya had just arrived at the Leaf Village and was just now in Hirusen's office. There the Hokage would be telling him everything that happened that night of Minato's death, as well as the current problems in the village, and how he felt that Naruto was in danger, as well as confessing that he did not know what to do, but she was glad that he had returned to the village. Jiraiya would be very surprised, although he also didn't know what to do, because he would be sad about Minato's death. And he also didn't feel able to take care of a child, so he would be very confused. But just as he was talking to his teacher, a voice is heard saying, "I knew you would come too, it hasn't been long, hasn't it?" Jiraiya, Sarutavizensei. The latter two are surprised to see that Tsuande was there, so they both say her name, and would ask what she was doing, since no one knew about her for a long time, but Tsunade responds, "I knew what happened with Minato, I figured the village didn't. It wouldn't be right, besides, I know what it's like to lose someone important, that's why I came, although I don't plan to stay long either. So because they don't tell me the situation." And so these three would start talking, but after a while, all three would leave to eat and drink, remembering old times, and even Orochimaru, and how he had changed. And so the night would come. By this time, only Tsunade and Jiraiya would be left, and Tsunade says, "You already saw the boy," to which Jiraiya would respond by saying no, because he did not feel that he could see him, since he felt that he had failed her, because he was his father's teacher, and had not been able to do anything to prevent his death. So Tsunade would realize that Jiraiya felt guilty, but she, not thinking that, would encourage him, telling him that it was not his fault, as well as telling him how it had been for her, the deaths of his loved ones, and he as well felt that it had been his fault, but over time, he realized that it was not so. And in this way, Tsunade would encourage Jiraiya, and even convince him to go to see Naruto. However, while they were advancing, Orochimaru met with Danzo, because this one had also arrived in the village and hidden en route. Danzo would tell him the situation, and how he planned to get Naruto, because if he managed to get the care of the child, he could train and manipulate him at will, so he would also have the kiwi under his power, without. However, Orochimaru ends by saying, "I have a better idea, because we don't take the child right now, so I can experiment with him. And maybe we'll figure out a way in which to control the fox's power. I know it's complicated because of you, so leave it to me. After all, no one should expect my gift." That, but Danzo would hesitate, however Orochimaru would manage to convince him. And so Orochimaru would leave in search of Naruto, and thanks to Danzo's help, Orochimaru knew what to do to not attract attention, and fulfill his mission without being discovered. And so a few minutes would pass. By this time, Orochimaru had arrived at the hospital and had left the ninjas who were taking care of Naruto on the floor. So Orochimaru was standing in front of Naruto and says, "So you're his son, well, I'll be able to take my revenge with you. I hope you can see this, Minato, your son for that. For everything you did to me, and I promise I will make him suffer." But just at that moment, Jiraiya and Tsunade would be arriving at Naruto's room, quickly advancing upon seeing the ninjas on the floor. And to their surprise they would find Orochimaru, who was holding Naruto in his arms. And seeing this, Jiraiya says, "It's you, Orochimaru, but what do you think you're doing? You better let the kid go, I don't know what you're thinking of doing, but I'll stop you himself," Tsunade says. "And I never thought I'd see you here again, what are you thinking of doing?" While Orochimaru says, "So you two are also here, this is indeed a reunion, don't you think? The three of us here after so long, well, I think I should have figured it out, at least from you, Jiraiya, after all. The fourth one was your student, and you weren't here to help him. You failed just like always, a loser never changes, however now this guy will be with me, I will take care of him from now on. But Jiraiya says, I won't leave you, so you better hand him over to me or else, but Orochimaru? He says, or else what will you do? You know well that you cannot stop me, no matter that I am. In both, they are no match for me." After saying that, Orochimaru would leave the place along with Naruto, while Jiraiya and Tsunade would leave behind him. But while doing so, Jiraiya says, "I can't fail him, I'm going to protect Naruto no matter what," to which Tsunade says, "No. You are not alone, I will help you, together we will save the child." And after a while, the three Sannin would end up meeting in the forest, and once there, a battle would begin between the three of them, in which Jiraiya would no longer hold back and would use all his power, including the Sage Mode, leaving Orochimaru surprised, since in all his previous battles, Jiraiya had never fought like this. Even Tsunade would be surprised, as she did not know the great power of Jiraiya, and so after a few hours of battle, it would finally come to an end, and Orochimaru was on the ground lifeless, while Jiraiya was already. He was under a tree with many wounds, but with Naruto in his arms, however, he was not happy at all, because despite everything, Orochimaru had been his companion at some point. Tsunade knew that, since she felt the same way. However, he knew that Jiraiya was the one who was suffering the most, because he had had to decide between the life of his former partner and Naruto, the son of his student. And so seeing his current state, Tsunade approaches him and says, "Let me help you." In this way, Tsunade uses her medicinal ninjutsu in Jiraiya, but at the same time he says, "I know it must not be easy, but I must say that that boy is very lucky to have you. After all, you would do anything for him, and I'm sure both he and Minato should be grateful to you. Even I am proud of you, you have really changed, you are not the same as before, it seems that you have finally matured. And watching you take care and fight for that baby, made me realize one thing, you are the one who should take care of him, here in the village. He is in a lot of danger, and the old man will not be able to take care of him. After all, as Hokage has a lot of work," to which Jiraiya replies, "I know, just the moment I saw Orochimaru with him, I realized. I must take care of him, after all, Naruto is my family. It may not be easy, but I will be there for him." And already after that a few hours would pass, and these he would meet with Hiruzen. However, Danzo was with the latter, as he wanted to keep an eye on him to give Orochimaru a chance. But seeing the two Sannin, Jiraiya and Tsunade arrive, Danzo knew that Orochimaru would be in trouble. However, moments later, this and Hiruzen, they would be very surprised, as they would be told everything that had happened. And after a few moments, Danzo ends up saying, "I'm really surprised. Orochimaru was very strong, but they still managed to defeat him. I guess they saved the village and the child, however, this shows that the child can be in danger at any time, so we have only one option. Sarutobi, the child must pass into my care. I will take care of him and hide him, no one will know about him, it's the only way to keep him safe." But at that moment Jiraiya says, "I can't allow that. I'll take care of Naruto from now on." Hiruzen is surprised to hear that and asks him if he was serious, to which Jiraiya replies that yes. Because who better to take care of him than him? After all, He had also been his father's teacher. Hirusen agreed with Jiraiya, but Danzo says, "This is for sure the best idea, Sarutobi. Hirai has already proved not to be the best example for a child. It could even put him even more in danger. Think about it, he may be a Sannin, but he doesn't know anything about taking care of people. And that child is very important for the village. After all, he is the Hinchuriki of the fox, and the son of the fourth. We can't take this lightly, or be guided by feelings. So if I have to talk to the old ones for Naruto's sake, I will." But Tsunade, seeing the Danzo's intentions, he ends by saying, "Hirai will no longer take care of Naruto alone, I will too." Everyone is surprised to hear that, while Tsunade goes on to say, "I'm sure that anyone who knows this will not hesitate to believe that we are the best choice for this. After all, Hiraya and I are two Sannin, so we can take more than good care of him," to which Hirusen ends up saying, "That being the case, I'm sure no one will say anything against it. So now Naruto will be under your care, Jiraiya, Tsunade." Danzo leaves upset to hear that, because he knew he had failed, because Tsunade had better, no one would doubt the two of them. In addition, he had also lost Orochimaru, a great ally, so now he had to not attract attention, and keep a low profile. Likewise, Hirusen tells his students, "I am proud of you too, you have really grown a lot, but despite that, I still see you as the first time we met. Besides, I'm surprised. I never thought you two would end up together, but I'm sure you'll do a great job with Naruto." To which Tsunade says, "Wait a minute, what are you saying? What do you mean they'll end up together?" To which Hirusen says, "That's the reason why they both take care. From Naruto, it's not like that. I understand that you wanted to keep it a secret, but things like love shouldn't be hidden. But I'm happy for you guys. I was already saying that it was very rare that we got back together at the same time," to which Jiraiya says, "I'm sorry, man. I know it's a surprise, even. I was surprised, but we are very glad to have your blessing." But Tsunade hits Jiraiya and says, "Stop lying, we don't have a relationship or anything. I just did that for the kid. I suspect Danzo was up to something and couldn't let him get away with it. He's just that, so we may have to take care of him now, but we won't be anything." And already after that a couple of weeks would pass. Hiraya, Tsunade, Naruto, and Shizune were living together, and they were all taking care of Naruto. Which wasn't being so easy, since a baby wasn't easy to take care of. On top of that, the people of the village were still afraid for Naruto. So they would start rejecting the Sannin, driving them away, and avoiding the most contact with them. And because of the attitude of Tsuna, firm, which they would not be silent in the face of this, and would defend that Naruto was not a threat, the Sannin would start having problems with the people in the village. Until after a year like this, they would make the decision to leave the village for a while, because they knew that if they continued in the village, Naruto would have a very hard life, and they now saw Naruto as their son, so they did not want Naruto. If this happened, and so the two Sannin, Hiraya and Tsunade, would leave the village together with Naruto, although Shizune would stay. This on Tsunade's orders, since she wanted him to teach medical ninjutsu. And so the time would pass, days, weeks, months and years, where the three Naruto, Hiraya and Tsunade would be traveling the world, having great adventures, all three of them. Also, once Naruto was old enough, the two Sannin would start their training, and so the time would keep passing. And even though they were traveling a lot, Naruto would be very happy, because Jiraiya and Tsunade really wanted him as their son, these three being practically a family. In addition, with the passage of time and years, Jiraiya and Tsunade would become more and more close, to the point where, without realizing it, they would fall in love and start a relationship. And so these three would have a happy and joyful life. And time would keep passing until Naruto's 12th birthday would arrive. By this time, Naruto was an extremely skilled ninja, being practically a master in all areas, controlling various natures of the chakra. Being a great ninja in taijutsu and in battle with weapons, especially with the sword, he was also skilled in getting out of genjutsus, although he was not very good at using them. Besides that, he knew a great variety of jutsus, including the Rasengan, and was also able to use ninjutsu. Your doctor, this is thanks to Tsunade. Naruto was a complete ninja in every way. In addition, he knew the truth about his parents, who they were and how they had died, being heroes for the village. So Naruto was happy and proud to be his son, and for him, Tsunade and Hirai. They were her family, and like her grandparents, although Tsunade didn't like me to call her grandma, but mom. In addition to this, Naruto had heard many stories about his parents and the village of the leaf. So he wanted to visit the village of the leaf very much because he knew that it was his home. Although so far I had not been able to do it. However, one thing I didn't know was everything about the nine-tailed fox. But now, just after finishing the celebration of his birthday, Hiraya and Tsunade both tell Naruto, "There is something important that you should know. It is something that we had been waiting for the moment to tell you. Since it is not something easy." And so the two Sannin would reveal to him the one that the fox was inside him. This would not be an easy thing for Naruto, however, he would not be alone, because thanks to the support of Hiraya and Tsunade, Naruto would manage to overcome this. In addition, Jiraiya would reveal to him that Minato must have had some reason for it, since he had left the key to the seal. So the only thing he could think is that he hoped that one day he would be able to control and use the power of the fox. Naruto would be shocked to hear Jiraiya's theory. But I would decide to believe in it, and I would want to learn how to use the fox chakra. So now I would start a new training to achieve this. And so a couple of weeks would pass. During all this time, everything had been very quiet. Naruto continued with his training, although by this time, the three of them, Jiraiya, Naruto, and Tsunade, were on their way to a small village. However, upon arrival, and without anyone noticing, Jiraiya would receive a message. This one didn't understand anything, but when reading it, this one would get a bigger surprise, since the message of "Be careful. There is a group of very dangerous ninjas called Akatsuki. They seek to gather and obtain the power of the nine-tailed beasts, which includes Naruto's fox. This group has started the search for the beasts. Members of this group usually wear black capes with red clouds. Among those ninjas are Hitachi Uchiha and Madara Uchiha. Besides the fact that one of the members owns the Rinnegan, we can't let them achieve their goal. I'll contact you later." Hirai could no longer believe what he had read. It was something surprising, although he also doubted of him being real, but only for a moment, because then he would believe that if someone had sent him a message like that, it was because it had to be real. Even so, Hirai already knew that they should take care of themselves from now on, especially Naruto, and try to verify that information. Since so far he had not listened. Nothing about Akatsuki. After that, and without Tsunade noticing, Jiraiya would start looking for information about Akatsuki. And after a few days in the village they were in, Jiraiya would tell Tsunade about the message he had received. She would be very surprised, although she was also upset. He would lest, since Hirai had already not told him anything when he knew this, but the Sannin would reveal to him that he had not done this, since he wanted to get information on his own before, since he could not completely trust that letter. But after investigating, in the last few days, I had managed to verify the existence of that one. This would leave Tsunade even more surprised, but at the same time worried about Naruto, so she would ask him what they would do now to know this. To which Hiraya responds, "Well, it's obvious, don't you think? We're going to protect Naruto, but he must also become stronger. Since we may not always be able to be with him, after all, he is already 12 years old. And in order to continue his training in a more efficient way, it will be best not to be moving from one place to another, don't you think?" To what Tsunade he says, "You're right, it's the best, but there's only one place, safe place for it, and it will not be easy to return." To which Hiraya says, "I know, but we have no other choice. The time has come to return to the village of the leaf." To which Tsunade says, "We have to tell Naruto." To what the Sannin says, "I know, but we'll do it once we get to the village. It's not easy to think that Naruto could be in danger at any moment, but he's not alone, he's got us. Besides, we trained him, don't forget." To what Tsunade says, "I know it well. Naruto is very strong, he also has great skills, and is very talented, but still, he is like my son. And if I have to sacrifice myself in order to save him, I will." To which Hirai already says, "I will not let that happen. We will be ready to anything, even for Madara Uchiha." And already after that, a few hours would pass and the two Sannin would break the news to Naruto. that they would travel to the village of the leaf. This would make Naruto very excited, because for him, it was a dream to go to the village where he was born and his parents had met. So he would be more than ready. And so moments later, the three of them, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Naruto, would start their journey towards the village of the leaf. And after almost a week, the three of them would finally arrive at the leaf village. Upon entering, Naruto would be surprised, and the first thing he would see would be the face of the previous Hokage. And thus for the first time, he would see the face of his father, Minato. Naruto would be very happy, and ends up saying, "I'm finally here, I had been waiting so long for this moment. I will make you proud of me, Dad, Mom, and like you, one day I will be a great ninja, you must," but Tsunade says, "Relax. We just arrived, besides there is someone we would like to introduce you, so let's go Naruto." And so these three would advance towards the Hokage's office. However, on the way, everyone would manage to recognize the Sannin and Naruto. So they would begin to see them with looks of rejection. Naruto wouldn't understand this, but both Tsunade and Jiraiya would just tell him to ignore them. After a few minutes, the three of them would arrive at Hirasen's office, where they would introduce him to Naruto. The Hokage would be surprised and happy, since after so long, he had seen Naruto again, in addition to his students. And he would also recognize that they had done a better job than he thought. But after that, Tsunade would take Naruto to lunch. She would also tell him that she would show him the village. But this was only so that Jiraiya could talk privately with Hirisen, to whom she would tell everything she knew about Akatsuki, including the mysterious note he had received, and the one that Itachi and Madara were in that group. However, to Jiraiya's surprise, Hirisen ends up saying, "So that's the name of that organization." Jiraiya, what I'm about to tell you is not something I'm proud of. I hope you understand that it was the only thing we could do to avoid a war. This thing I'm about to reveal to you is one of the biggest secrets of the village. It is about the truth about Itachi Uchiha and the death of his clan. And so Hirisen would tell him everything that had happened, while Jiraiya would already be left. Surprised to know this, however, he did not understand why his master had told him, but Hirisen says, "You had to know this to understand everything, since Itachi did not end up with his clan alone. Someone helped him, I say it was a masked guy, who called himself Madara Uchiha. Once Itachi fulfilled his mission, he joined Madara's group, this in order to watch over him and keep the village safe. So I'm sure that that message you received was sent by Itachi Uchiha himself." Hirai is already very surprised to hear all this and says, "Wow, never. More imagine if things were like this, then Itachi is not a traitor as everyone thinks, still I am very surprised. Especially because that means that really Madara Uchiha is alive and is after Naruto, we must have. Careful, you have to protect Naruto," to which Hirisen says, "I agree, but if you're here, it's because you have a plan, don't you?" To which Jiraiya says, "That's how old. I want your permission to stay in the village for a while. I want to start a new training with Naruto, and this is the only place he can be safe while we train." Hirisen would accept, since the village was his home after all. Although it would remind him that there were chances that people would not accept Naruto. But after that, Hirai would already ask his teacher for a ninja band, this because he wanted to give it to Naruto. Well, this one had the necessary level to be a blade ninja. Hirisen would accept, although he would tell her that he would not be able to participate in the Chunin exams, since they were just a short time away from starting. At the same time, Tsunade was meeting Naruto, and they would arrive at Lichiraku, where for the first time, Naruto would eat the ramen of Toiki, falling in love with it, and recognizing it as the best ramen he had eaten. And so a few hours would pass and the night would come. Jiraiya would meet Tsunade and Naruto at their new house, but once there, Jiraiya would deliver a ninja band to Naruto, making him very happy, in addition to motivating him a lot to become stronger. But at that moment, Hirai already says, "Naruto, there is something you should know, the real reason why we are here." And so the Itsunade would tell Naruto about Akatsuki, as well as the one who had to become stronger, and that's why they would start a new training so that he could control the fox's power better, since it could save him. But besides that, they would tell him the reason why he had not grown up in the village of La Jolla, because the people of the village would. He was afraid to know that the fox lived inside him. This would be a hard thing for Naruto, but at the same time, he would thank the two Sannin for taking care of him and being with him always, as well as telling them that they were his family, and they also saw him as a son. And after that, Naruto finishes by saying, "All right, I'm ready to start the training. I'm not going to let Akatsuki capture me." And so the three of them would go out into the forest to start training. And the days would pass. With the passage of time, Naruto would get to know Kakashi, although by this time, Kakashi was already the leader of Team 7, which was formed by Sasuke, Sakura and Hinata, although by this time Naruto did not know them, because from the village of the Leaf, he only knew Toiki, Hiruzen and Kakashi. And time would keep passing and Naruto would keep training, giving his all. However, after a couple of months, the Chunin exams were about to be held, and Kakashi would ask a favor from Naruto and Jiraiya, because he knew of Naruto's great abilities, since more than once he had seen his training and what he was capable of, for which Kakashi would ask Naruto to face his team, as he wanted to prepare them for the Chunin exams. Naruto would accept this and Jiraiya saw it as a good challenge for Naruto, and so Team 7 and Naruto would reunite. Being together, Kakashi would introduce them. However, Sasuke, seeing only Naruto, says, "You said that we would have a sensei test today. But what does this mean? He's just a kid, and you can't see that he's bigger than me." To which Sakura says, "Sasuke is right, sensei. Besides, it doesn't look like he's very skilled. We could hurt him." While Hinata says, "They shouldn't underestimate him. Let's trust our sensei, guys." But that Kakashi says, "Hinata is right, they should not underestimate their rivals. You must be prepared for everything, that's why I asked Naruto to help me with this, but before we start, I warn you that Naruto is your age, however, he was never in the academy, so don't underestimate or defeat them." Terra, Sasuke, and then she says, "If this is our test, it will be easier than I thought, but once I defeat him, it will be better for you to face us, sensei." That will be a challenge, but Naruto, when he hears all this, says, "This is going to be fun. I will finally check the level of the Leaf Ninjas, so come with everything you have, don't worry about me. Just use all your power." And after that, Naruto smiles, to which Sakura says, "There's no doubt he's a fool." While Sasuke says, "Don't be so smug, kid." But at that moment, Kakashi would give the beginning of the battle. Naruto against the three members of Team 7, while Jiraiya and Kakashi would only be watching, and so time would pass. Until after a while, the battle and trial would finally be over, although this was because the three members of Team 7 couldn't continue the battle anymore. For despite outnumbering Naruto in quantity, they had managed to do no more than give him a blow. While Naruto had not given them a chance to do anything, and even Sasuke with his Sharingan had not been a rival. But now that the battle would be over, Naruto would just say, "I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt them, I just got excited and got carried away. I've never faced anyone other than my grandparents before, and I'm usually the one who ends up on the floor. But I hope it didn't bother you and we can become friends." The three genin of Team 7 are shocked to hear that. However, Sasuke gets upset and says, "I can't believe he lost to someone like you," and then he would leave the place. While Sakura and Hinata would apologize to Naruto for Sasuke's attitude, but besides that, they would also tell him the one that of course they would want to be his friends, in addition to recognizing each other. His great strength. Well, they were both surprised, since they had never met someone so strong before, besides their sensei. However, and to their surprise, Naruto tells them, "Let me help you with your injuries," and at that time, Naruto would use medical ninjutsu. This would leave the two girls surprised, who would ask him how he was able to do it. And Naruto would tell them that he had learned with his grandmother, Tsunade, telling them that his training had not been easy at all. But the two girls were surprised with Naruto's skill. However, Hirai, she ends up saying, "Naruto, because they are not going to eat something, you can take the day off." And Kakashi would say the same to her students, and so the three of them would leave, although while they were doing it, Naruto says, "It's a pity that Sasuke left so quick, I would have liked to help him with his injuries." But on the other hand, Kakashi says, "Naruto is stronger than I imagined. Besides, I didn't imagine that he knew how to use medical ninjutsu. It's amazing, at this rate he could surpass Minato-sensei. To which Jiraiya says, that's right, Naruto. He is the only one who can achieve something like this, however, it will not be an easy thing. After all, he still has a hard road to travel. But Kakashi, there's something I want to ask you. If one day I'm not Tsunade either, take care of Naruto, you would do that for me. Kakashi is surprised to hear that and would ask why he was saying that. Therefore Jiraiya, being Kakashi one of the few people he trusted, would tell him about Akatsuki. Although hiding the truth about Hitachi from him. And already after that a few hours would pass. Naruto would be touring the village along with Sakura and Hinata, but since it was already too late, these three. They would end up separating, however. When Naruto was on his way home, he would get to see Sasuke, so he would start following him. Until he saw that Luchija would arrive in the forest, and there, he would start training. Upon seeing him, Naruto would watch him for a few minutes, until he finished. Coming out from where he was and says, "You're Sas, right? How about if I help you with your training? After all, training is always better if you do it with someone else," to which Sasuke says, "It's you, what do you want? I didn't ask for your help, so leave," but Naruto says, "What's the matter with you? I just want to help you." But Sasuke would refuse and tell him to leave once more. Although Naruto wouldn't and would challenge him to a battle. Sasuke would refuse, as he knew it would only be wasting time. But Naruto would start provoking him, until the point where Sasuke ends up throwing himself against Naruto, and so these two would start a battle. Although unlike before, now Naruto only wanted to help Sasuke, so he would fight at his same level, while Sasuke, knowing that Naruto didn't use everything he had, would only get more upset, but also give more and more of himself. Becoming stronger during the battle, and after a few minutes of battle, they would both end up on the ground. And Sasuke says, "What is wrong with you?" To which Naruto replies, that it's not obvious, we're training, I've never seen someone like you, that's why I do it. It shows that you want to get stronger. And when someone wants that so much, it's because there's a big reason behind it. Also, if you didn't realize, during the battle you became stronger. I am sure that one day you will be much stronger. So you know, when you want to train with someone, just look for me after all. Now we are partners, and well I retire, but first I will do this, and so Naruto uses his medical ninjutsu to heal Sasuke's wounds. And then he would disappear, leaving for his home, while Sasuke would be very surprised with everything. This and ends by saying, "Naruto, I've never met someone like you before," and after that the days would just keep passing. Naruto would continue to live with Team 7 and train with Jiraiya and Tsunade. And although he would notice that the people of the village rejected him and moved away from him, Naruto was very happy. Well, now I had new friends. However, after a few days, the Chunin exams would start, so Naruto would continue to focus on his training. But also during the days that Team 7 would be in the Forest of Death, Naruto would train with Kakashi. While Team 7 would suffer a lot, because they would have several battles in the forest, however, they would manage to survive and pass the test. Although later preliminary battles would be held, and at the end, the day of the finals would be announced, where Sas would be the only member of the 7th team to make it through to the finals, but now had a half to train. However, he would ask Kakashi if Naruto could train with them, to which Kakashi would accept. And so Naruto and Sasuke would start a training with Kakashi, while Jiraiya and Tsunade would be very calm and start to consider staying to live in the village of the Leaf, for in spite of everything, they were very well there. However, elsewhere, Pain was telling the Akatsuki members, "The time has come to start the capture of the tailed beasts." But after that, Pain says, "We have information that 2 of the Hinchirikis are found. They enter the Leaf Village, one is the Fox Hinchiriki, and the other is the Shukaku, so, Itachi, you are the best choice. You and Kisame take care of tying for the 2 boys." And after that, both Itachi and Kisame would leave for the village of the Leaf, and so the days would pass. On the one hand, Naruto and Sasuke would be training, and on the other, Itachi and Kisame would advance to the village. However, after a little more than a week, the 2 Akatsuki members would manage to enter the Leaf Village, and once there, They would discover that the Chunin exams were being held, and that in less than a month. Therefore, they would come to the conclusion that that day of the finals would be the best time for them to act. And so they would let the days pass, until finally the day of the finals of the Chunin exams would arrive. On the one hand, Sasuke was ready to win the finals, while on the other, Naruto would be with Sakura and Hinata, watching everything and supporting Sasuke, and after a while, Sasuke's time would finally come. He would face Gaara, but while they were facing, Itachi and Kisame would be watching everything, and at that moment maybe he says to me, "Wow, so that guy is your younger brother. And I never believed that it would exist. I thought that you had finished with your whole clan, but surely you have a reason to leave it alive." "It's not like that." "Well, that doesn't matter. Anyway, not it. He's doing badly. You can tell he knows what he's doing," while Itachi was saying to himself, "Wow, you're doing great. It shows that you've grown. Sasu, you're very strong. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I can't let you continue with this," but at that moment, Sasu would do the Chidori, with he would manage to hit Gaara. Everyone would be shocked to see this, but a few moments later, everyone in the place would take a big surprise, because Gaara, suffering so much pain, would end up transforming into the Shukaku. Sasuke couldn't believe his eyes, while the people at the place I would be scared, and they would start running away from the place. Also, Naruto says, "That's it, there's no doubt, it's one of the 9 beasts." Then Gaara is like me, Sasuke not himself, Kakashi, Ge, Jiraiya, Tsunade and other ninjas would think the same as Naruto. But at that moment, these would be taken by surprise, and everyone who was watching the battle would end up falling trapped in a genjutsu, all but Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Tsunade. Seeing this, the 3 of them would be very surprised, and they say, "This is not a normal genjutsu. This is not right, we should get ready to fight," but Tsunade says, "You guys stop the Shukaku, I'll take care of Naruto and the others." But at the same time, Hiruzen says, "What does this mean, Kazekage? We are supposed to be allies," to which the Kazekage says, "This is not about us. Yes, I recognize that Gaara is a Hinshiriki, but I did not expect this to happen, but count on my help to stop it." And so these 2 would join the battle against the Shukaku, so now they would be the 2 Kages, Jiraiya and Kakashi against the Shukaku. While I know that he would move away, because he will go with Tsunade to help Naruto and the others. Well there, Tsunade thought to help them, although it was not as easy as she thought, but after a few moments, Naruto would be the first to wake up. When doing so, he asks what had happened, but Tsunade says, "Naruto. Naruto, be careful, they were caught by a very powerful genjutsu. Only very few people could do a jutsu like that. So we must be vigilant." But at that moment, these 3, Tsunade, Sasuke and Naruto, hear a voice saying, "Wow, so they managed to endure their genjutsu. They must be skilled, but still, they are no match for us. He doesn't wait, but if you're his brother, so you ran away when you saw the beast, you're a disgrace." Everyone is shocked to hear that, especially Sasuke, while Kitsunade says, "Who are you? Show yourself if you dare," and just at that moment, Itachi and Kisame would appear. Upon seeing them, Tsunade would be surprised and says, "Wow, so it's about you. By your outfit I can see that you are from Akatsuki, isn't it? Besides, if I'm not mistaken, you must be Itachi, don't you?" True, but Sasuke, seeing his brother, says, "Itachi, we are finally face to face, he had been waiting so long for this moment." But Itachi says, "I'm not interested in you, I'm not here for you, so get lost. All we want is the fox. So if he's handed over to us, I'll forgive his life." Naruto is surprised, both to know that Sasuke had a brother, and this was part of Akatsuki, and to know that the ninjas who were behind him were in that place, but Tsunade says, "It seems that they are not lucky, since no matter what you do, I'll finish you off myself. Naruto, Sasuke, run away from here, I'll take care of both of you." To which maybe he says to me, "Don't make us laugh, even if they were an army they couldn't deal with us." But Hitachi says, "Don't underestimate her, she is one of the 3 Anin, so don't let your guard down." To which maybe he says to me, "Wow, this really gets interesting, but still, we can't lose this battle." To which Tsunade says, "You heard me, you 2 leave now, but Sasuke says, I had been waiting for this moment and not. I'll miss my chance, I'll finish you, and so Sasuke activates his Sharingan, makes the Chidori, and then throws himself against Itachi, but Sasuke could not do anything, and would only be captured by Itachi, who would end up breaking his hand, and says, with this you will not cause problems, you are very weak little brother, you need hate, but Naruto seeing this, he would jump, maybe I would take it by surprise, and would send him flying with his sword, while Tsunade says, they are fools, Naruto, do not lower your guard. They are not simple ninjas. And after that, Tsunade would throw herself at Hitachi, and while she wouldn't manage to touch him, what she would manage is to save Sasuke. And then he would take his distance, and he says, Naruto, take care of him, Sasuke. I know it must not be easy for you, but you weren't losing your mind. Now wait for me here, I'll take care of it. And after that, Tsunade would throw herself against the two Akatsuki members, thus giving Indigo the battle. However, from the first moment, Tsunade would fight seriously, because she knew that she had to face two very strong ninjas. But Naruto seeing this, says, I can't leave her alone, I have to help. It's time to test the results of my training, and at that moment Naruto starts to come together. Chakra of the fox, to the point that it would end up being covered by the red chakra, and once ready, it would make a Rasengan and throw itself against Kisame, managing to hit him. This is thanks to Tsunade, who had seen Naruto's attack. And after that, Tsunade would take by surprise that Akasame with a blow, with which she would send him flying, falling right to the side of the Shukaku, for which now everyone would see them. And by doing so, Hirai already says, wait a minute, that cloak is, there is no doubt, it is Akatsuki's, but if he is here, then and by observing, I would see that Tsunade was in a battle, so Jiraiya says, I'm sorry, I have to go, to which Hiruzen says, relax, we'll take care of this, Kakashi. Take care of that guy, please. And so Kakashi would take care of Kisame, while Jiraiya, after a few moments, would appear where Naruto, Tsunade and Sasuke were, and once there, they would have surrounded Itachi, who when he sees them says, wow, two Sannin together, even I couldn't get out of this battle alive, and maybe I can't either, so I only have one choice. And so Itachi was about to run away, and so these two would break a wall. But when doing so, Jiraiya says, he is mine, you go for the other, and so Jiraiya and Itachi would start a battle, with which, little by little, they would begin to move away, to the point where they both ended leaving the village, but once outside, Jiraiya stops and says, you can leave, there is no reason to continue with this battle. Itachi is surprised to hear that and says, what do you mean by that? Is it a trick? But Jiraiya says, take advantage now that no one sees us, you can see this as a thank you for your message the other day, or for everything you have done for the village, and Itachi is surprised to hear that and says, how much do you know? To which the Sannin responds, that doesn't matter, the only thing that really matters is to finish with Akatsuki, you know that well, so we'll meet again. Itachi was very surprised, but he also knew that he could trust the Sannin, which is why the Uchiha ends up saying, please take care of Sasuke, and after saying that, Itachi would leave. While on the other hand, Kisame had not had a chance against Kaka. Thus Tsunade, in addition to having received a strong attack from the Shukaku and due to the situation, they would have finished with him without giving him any chance. While to stop the Shukaku, Naruto had been very important, because this one without knowing how, he had managed to count his chakra with Gaara's, and had made him see that they were not so different, because both were Hinchiriquis, and so after a chakra inside him, Naruto would have managed to stop Gaara, but it had also made him reflect on who he was, and how his life had been all this time. But besides that, Naruto had told Gaara that he didn't have to be alone anymore, because he would be with him, and from that moment on, they would be friends. However, even though everything had ended well, Sasuke was not feeling well, because he had realized the great difference in power between him and his brother Itachi, so it had to be more stronger. He also felt guilty for not being able to help Naruto, because during all the time he had been training, Sasuke would begin to consider Naruto a friend, and now he almost lost him at the hands of his brother, the one who once I had already taken everything from him. And after that a few hours would pass, he was training alone, because he didn't want to waste time, while on the other hand, Hirusen was with Hiraya, and the Sannin would tell him how he had let Itachi leave. Well, I knew that they would need it if they wanted to take down Akatsuki, but everyone thought that Itachi had escaped from Jiraiya, because the Sannin had told that. Likewise, the Kazakage, Gaara, and the rest of the Sand ninjas had left the Leaf Village. However, they would continue to have a good relationship with the Leaf. And finally, Naruto was meeting with Tsunade, whom Naruto would ask to tell him about Itachi, because he could not understand why Sasuke wanted to end his brother. And so Tsunade would tell him the story of Itachi, leaving Naruto very surprised, because he could not believe that Itachi had finished with his clan. However, after thinking about it for a few minutes, Naruto could not understand why Itachi had left Sasuke alive. However, since I didn't understand or find a logical answer, I wouldn't give it much importance either, but what I would understand Sasuke much better now. And so the days would pass, things would be very quiet. In the village of the Leaf, Naruto would continue with his training to control and use the power of the fox, but at the same time, he would start another training with Sasuke and with Team 7, because Naruto wanted to help them, since he felt that they were so strong, but most of all I wanted to help Sasuke. Although on the other hand, Itachi had met with the members of Akatsuki, telling them the situation, and how they had been taken by surprise. Since Naruto, the fox Hinchiriki, was under the care of two Sannin, Hiraya and Tsunade, but besides that, they had been to the place. The Hokage and the Kazakage, therefore, these had not had a chance, and Kisame had fallen in battle. But after that, Pain says, "It's a pity, I hope you won't have a problem, since now you will have to be alone for a while, until we find a replacement to Kisame. But until then things remain the same, we must continue with our mission, capture the beasts." With Kola, but at the same time, Deidara teased Itachi, saying that he was not as strong as he thought. However, Obito the Kua would be hidden watching and listening to everything. He would feel that there was something strange. Besides knowing the truth about Itachi, he would not trust him at all, so he would have Setsu watching over Itachi. And so time would keep passing, and a year would end up passing. By this time in the Leaf Village things were very quiet. The Sasu had become Chunin, just like Naruto, because once Sasu achieved promotion, Naruto would take his place to participate in the exams with Team 7. In addition to that, Sasu had become much stronger, as well as Sakura and Hinata, but especially Naruto, who was able to use the red amount of chakra with up to 4 tails without losing control. However, due to this, Hirai had already chosen to also teach him the Sage Mode, as he wanted Naruto to be as strong as possible, since Akatsuki was a great threat. On top of that, Naruto had managed to win over a lot of people in the village, because he did a great job in his missions. But even so, many other members of the village would still be afraid of the nine-tailed fox. Besides, by this time, Hiraya and Tsunade would be even happier than before, because it was something very happy for them to see how Naruto grew up, since he was like their son. However, just at this time, a year after what happened in the Chunin exams, Hirusen would meet with Hiraya and Tsunade. Being together, the two Sannin would ask the why that he had called them, because the Hokage had said that he had something very important to talk to them, and Hirusen responds by saying, "I want you to know that I'm going to leave office as a Hokage. I'm old and the village needs another Hokage. Someone who can give them security at all times. And that's why I called them. They are a family after all. Jiraiya, I would like you to become the 5th Hokage. What do you say?" This would leave the two Sannin surprised, as they were not expecting it. However, Jiraiya ends up rejected the post. Hirusen and Tsunade, they couldn't believe this and both ask. They would ask why, as they both thought it was a great offer, as well as a great choice, but Jiraiya would still refuse the position, as it was not something he wanted, as he considered being a Hokage to be a lot of work. However, seeing that Tsunade insisted, Jiraiya mentioned that she might be a better choice than he. Hirusen would be surprised, as he had not considered it. However, Tsunade would get nervous and say that she could not be Hokage. However, Hirai would already mention that yes, while Hirisen, after thinking about it for a moment, I would say that Hiraya was right and that she could become a better option. This would make Tsunade surprised, but still, she wouldn't be sure. However, at that time, Team 7, consisting of Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, Hinata and Kakashi, would arrive at the office. For these had finished their last mission. However, upon meeting the two Sananai, Naruto would ask what was going on and if everything was okay. But Hirai would already answer saying yes, because Tsunade would become the 5th Hokage. This would surprise everyone, especially Naruto. Which I would say, really is that, you're really going to be the 5th Hokage. Tsunade would see a big smile on Naruto's face and says, I'm not sure, I don't know if I can be a good Hokage. But Naruto says, how can you say that? If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be who I am. Besides, Grandpa Hashirama was also Hokage, and you are very strong. I don't know anyone who deserves to be a Hokage more than you. Besides, I'm sure you'd be the best Hokage ever. Tsunade is surprised to hear that and says, are you serious, do you really trust me? To which Naruto says that's right, besides I would be happy one day to be your successor, after all, I also want to become Hokage. And so thanks to the words and support of both Naruto and Hiraya, Tsunade would end up accepting the position of 5th Hokage. Well, deep down this was something that I had always wanted, but I didn't feel that I was capable for that position. But now I was willing to try. And after having accepted, Naruto would say that they had to celebrate it, so he would ask his companions, Sasuke, Sakura and Hinata, for help to prepare a party for his mother Tsunade. However, elsewhere, Itachi had found the Terskolas and defeated it without much trouble. This is thanks to the power of the black flames of the Matarazu. However, just as he defeats the beast, Itachi hears a voice saying, wow, looks like you succeeded to beat our prey before us. Although well, that doesn't matter, after all, we are on the same side, isn't it, Itachi? The latter is surprised. But at that moment he would see that it was about Deidara, and seeing it, Itachi says, so it's about you, well, it will be so. Easier to move the beast, take care of that, and then Itachi starts to leave. However, Deidara gets upset and says, who do you think you are to give me orders? You're not my boss. You've had enough of me, don't you dare turn your back on me. And after that, I would drop a little bomb on Itachi. However, Itachi would avoid the attack without problems, and then he appears in front of Deidara saying, you shouldn't have done that. But Deidara laughs and then says, no, you're the one who shouldn't underestimate me, this is because of what you did to me in the past. And at that moment it would be revealed that it was not Deidara, but a clay clone, which would explode in front of Itachi. With this explosion, Deidara leaves where he was, mocks Itachi and then says, that's what happens to you for underestimating me. I told you, Sasori, I told you that I would finish with him, this is the power of my explosive art, but Sasori says, don't let your guard down, boy, remember that Itachi is not someone normal, to what Deidara says. How can you be afraid of him after what? What did I just do? No one could get out of my attack alive, however, at that moment, from the smoke screen that had been created by the explosion. A fireball would come out, and although Deidara would manage to avoid the attack, he would be surprised and says, how is it possible? Who do you think you are? Well, it doesn't matter, you're just delaying your death. But Itachi shows up, this one had lost only his cloak, and says, very well. Yes, Tan. However much you want to die, I will finish you, and so Itachi would throw himself against Deidara, starting a battle between the two of them. However, Setsu would be watching everything and says, this is not good, I must warn him as soon as possible, and then he would leave. And moments later, Setsu would appear in front of Obito, telling him the situation, for which Obito says, this is not good, that Deidara is a fool, although good. Maybe it's not so bad, if they manage to finish with Itachi, we will take away a big problem in the future. After all, I know that sooner or later he will betray us. And after saying that, Obito and Setsu would leave, because they thought to observe the battle of Itachi. While the battle of Itachi against Deidara would be taking place. However, to Deidara's surprise, Itachi was having the upper hand in the battle, while Sasori would be watching only. But after a few minutes like this, Sasori ends up initiating an attack against Itachi, because he had reached an agreement with Deidara, in which he had promised to help him. And so now Itachi would face the two of them against Katsuki, which would complicate the battle for him. While on the other hand, Naruto would be with his friends and family, celebrating the Ketsuna of now would be the 5th Hokage. And then Naruto and everyone would already be asleep, resting peacefully. While on the other hand, Itachi had managed to defeat Deidara and Sasori, although this had not been easy, so he had received some injuries, and above all he had spent a lot of chakra. Therefore, now somewhat exhausted, he would be ready to take a break, but at that moment, he would be taken by surprise by Obito, who would try to finish him off. And although Obito would manage to go to Itachi, the latter would manage to save himself and take his distance, and then say, "Wow, so you're here too, Madara. Then it was you who sent them against me," to which Obito replies, "I would like to say yes, but it's not like that. They acted on their own, but given your current state, I cannot miss this opportunity. After all, I know that in the future you will be a problem for me, so I will finish with you now." But Itachi says, "I can't die here," and so I would give a battle between the two of them. However, thanks to the Kamui, Obito would have great speed. In addition, Itachi was not in his best condition, receiving more wounds all over his body. Obito thought that he had won the battle, because he could see how Itachi was feeling very bad, and at that moment he says, "This is the end. But once I finish with you, I plan to find your brother. And I will reveal to him everything about you, the truth about what happened that night, when we finished with the Uchiha clan. How you did everything for the village. I'm sure Sasuke will be a great replacement for you." But Itachi gets upset when he hears that and says, "I won't forgive you for this. And at that moment you would succeed. Surprise Obito, as he would use the Susanoo." Seeing this, Obito says, "I didn't know you could use that power." "Well, it doesn't matter, you'll just delay your death," and that way Obito would start his attack. However, this one would not manage to touch Itachi. Obito didn't understand what was going on, but Itachi says, he is surprised, "It is useless, nothing will work, since my Susanoo owns Yada's mirror." Obito is surprised to hear that. However, Itachi, instead of attacking, would take advantage of this to escape, managing to disappear for a moment from Obito's sight. And thanks to this, Itachi could. This was because he was in a very bad state and could not continue fighting. And so, once already hidden, Itachi says to himself, "I need to rest and recover chakra. A little more, and it would have been the end of me, but now I have to think about what to do, since most likely Akatsuki will come for me. It looks like I'm going to need your help eventually, and I never thought I'd say that." While on the other hand, Obito says, "I shouldn't have underestimated him, despite being in a lousy state, and Tachi is amazing. But still, I'll finish him next time." And already after that it would happen. A week, by this time, Tsunade had already officially become the 5th Hokage, but besides that, by this time, Hirai had already left the village, as he had received an important message. However, no one. He had stated the reason for this, telling her only, "To Tsunade and Naruto, I had to do something important." However, Naruto felt something strange, and so he would go after Hiraya without her noticing. While in the Leaf Village, things would be very quiet, but on the other hand, Madara had talked to Pain and told him that Itachi had betrayed them, as he had eliminated Deidara and Sasori, as well as Kisame, being this the real culprit of his death. Pain would not understand this, since it made no sense, but Madara would reveal to him the one that after what happened, he had investigated and discovered that Itachi works for the Leaf Village, and that he had betrayed his clan in order to support his village. Pain would be surprised, but he would not doubt Madara, which is why Pain ends up saying, "If this is the way things are, we have no other choice, we must finish with him. Itachi knows a lot about us, and he could become a big threat," to which Madara says, "Still, he could never beat you. But taking him down is a great idea." And after that, Pain would give Haiden and Kakuzu the mission to take care of Itachi, which would make Kakuzu very happy, because he knew that Itachi had a big reward, which meant a lot of money for him, and so already with this mission, the two of them would leave in search of Itachi. While Obito was saying to himself, They are the ones who are indicated to finish him. After all, even Itachi is no match for your health. But while that was happening, Pain, Konan, Madara and Setsu would start sealing the Three Tails into the Gedo statue. And so a couple more days would pass, and Jiraiya would finally reach his destination. This one was taking you on a business. Naruto, who was watching him from afar, says to himself, "I've been following the old man for days, and nothing has happened. I'm starting to feel like I'm just wasting my time." But right at that moment, Naruto would get a big surprise, as he would see how a hooded man would sit in front of Jiraiya. This would get his attention. So he would watch very carefully. While Jiraiya having that man in front of him, he says, "What is it that happened? What your message said is that you needed help, and I find it hard to believe that a ninja like you would ask for help, and Tachi." To what this one says, "That's why I did it, because I'm not in my best state. Akatsuki discovered me, Madara knew the truth about me, he and 2 others tried to finish me, I managed to eliminate 2. But Madara is stronger than I thought, he also has a very curious ability. I managed to escape at the last moment, but I still can't fully recover, and I can't trust anyone. I still find it hard to believe that I asked you for help, but I don't have anyone else. Besides, I'm sure they'll be coming looking for me very soon. I'm not asking you to protect me, I just want help to heal my wounds. After that, we will continue as we were," to which Jiraiya says, "I will help you. But first you will have to tell me about that Malara skill, although I do not know how you could help later. Since you are no longer with them, however, maybe it's time for you to do something else, maybe I could help you get back to the Leaf Village." Itachi is surprised to hear that, as it was not something he expected to hear. However, this surprise would be so great that by moving his head, Naruto would manage to see his face, and when he sees it, Naruto says, "Wait a minute. That guy is Itachi, he's Sasuke's brother, but what is the old man doing with him? Why are they meeting in secret? What is going on? Is he hiding something? No, I can't think that. The old man is like a father. Well, never mind, I have to find out." And after that, Naruto would move on to where they were. However, Itachi says, "What do you mean by that? I can't go back," but Jiraiya says, "There is a way to do that, but you would have to reveal the truth of what happened. Now Tsunade is the Hokage, and I'm sure if I talk to her she'll understand. You also deserve to live quietly. You have already done a lot for the village," but Hitachi says, "Thank you, but someone like me does not deserve that. Besides, Sasuke can't possibly know the truth, it's better to keep things that way. Now the only thing that matters is to stop Madara Uchiha. If we don't, the village could be in great danger," to which Jiraiya says, "All right, then we'll save that for later." And so Tachi was about to tell him everything about Madara, but at that moment, Naruto would already be by their side. Even though he didn't plan to do something, having in front of the Itachi, Naruto would remember what Tsunade had told him, how Itachi had finished with his clan, and how Sasuke felt, so at that moment, Naruto would think that the best thing was to take advantage of the moment and finish with him once and for all. And so believing this, Naruto would do the Chidori. This thanks to the fact that he had learned it during the month of his training with Kakashi and Sasuke, and when doing so, he says, "This is for Sasuke," and so Naruto would launch his attack against Hitachi. However, before he could touch him, Jiraiya would already surprise him, stopping his arm and saying, "What is it that you are doing? Naruto, besides, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be in this place," to which Naruto says, "What are you doing, old man? Why did you do that? This was our chance to finish him off. He must pay for what he did to Sasuke. I will not stand idly by while you are in front of him. I don't know what's going on, but I won't let him." However, Jiraiya says, "Now the only thing you need to know is that he is not an enemy. You can trust him, trust me." Naruto is surprised to hear that and says, "No, this is not possible, that you are not the old one, surely he did something to you." However, Jiraiya would slap him on the head and says, "Stop saying that, you don't see that you are drawing attention. Now we have to go somewhere else. We'd better get going besides, so I can help you with your injuries, Yukija." And so these three would leave. However, as they moved forward, Naruto would not let down his guard, because although he did not trust Itachi, he wanted to know what was being thought, and why Jiraiya was already with him. But as they were walking towards the forest, Itachi says, "I see you care about Sasuke, don't you? That means you're his friend, right?" To which Naruto says, "Of course I am, Sasuke is my best friend. I know how hard he has tried to defeat you, I know how much he has suffered, that's why I can't accept that you are with us. So listen to me well, no matter what happens, I will help him to eliminate you." But Itachi smiles when he hears that and says, "I'm glad to see that Sasuke has people like you in his life, I'll be waiting for that moment." Naruto is surprised to hear that, because he did not understand anything, and then he would ask what he meant by that. But Itachi would not answer. After that, the three of them would arrive at the forest, and once there, Itachi would show all the wounds he had, which would surprise Jiraiya and Naruto, because they would see that he was really hurt, so Jiraiya would start helping him. And Naruto, seeing this, says, "Why are you doing this, old? I still don't understand anything." To what Jiraiya already says, "I told you before, you can trust him, and Itachi is not an enemy. It's a long story, but maybe one day I'll tell you." And Naruto, hearing his words, would remember the time when Itachi had told him that he was glad that he was friends with his brother. And after thinking about it for a moment, Naruto uses his medical ninjutsu to help Itachi. The latter is surprised and says, "What is it that you do?" But Naruto replies, "It's my medical ninjutsu, with this you will heal faster, I just hope I won't regret it in the future. Besides, you owe me one now." While Jiraiya says, "Well done kid, you're right, this is better, relax Itachi, you're in good hands." Naruto has a great talent as a medical ninja, and if he wanted it he could become the best in history, to which Naruto says, "This is only thanks to Mamatsunade." But while Naruto was healing Itachi, Jiraiya says, "Itachi, what do you think about telling Naruto the truth? I know it must not be easy, but you can trust him. I'm sure he'll understand, plus he'll be able to keep the secret," to which Itachi ends up saying, "I think I have no choice if you don't. He might try to finish me off again, but Naruto, no matter what you hear. Now, just remember that Sasuke can't know this, and the day he comes for me, you have to let him finish with me." To what Naruto says, "I said it before, I'll help him myself." To what Itachi says, "Very well. Then you know." To what Jiraiya says, "Get ready, kid." And so the Sannin would tell Naruto the truth about Itachi. Naruto would be very surprised, because he would never have imagined that things would be like this. And to Itachi's surprise, Naruto would apologize to him, because in the end he had done everything for the village, and for Sasuke. However, at that time, he would also say that they should tell Sasuke, but Itachi would refuse, saying that Sasuke couldn't know the truth. Naruto didn't understand this, but Itachi would make him promise that he would never tell Sasuke. And already after that, the three of them would be resting, and Jiraiya says, "It will be better if you come with us. I know you don't want to go to the Leaf Village, but at least you should be not far from the village. Because then we can be close if something happens. Besides, we still have a lot to talk about," to which Itachi would agree, "But after that, I would tell you about Madara, and his ability to make himself intangible, leaving them surprised. But after telling you all about Madara, I would now tell you about the rest of the Akatsuki members, Setsu, Haiden, Kakusu. And finally Pain, saying that he had not seen him fight, but that from what he had heard, he was very strong. Besides possessing the Rinnegan, and finally he would mention to him that along with him there was always a blue-haired woman named Konan. Although I didn't know anything about her." This would leave the Sannin very surprised, who would say, "That's not possible," and then ask for him how Pain was. Which is why Itachi would describe it, and after that, Jiraiya already says, "It's not possible, but what's going on?" That description, it sounds like Yaeko, but the one who had the Rinnegan was not him, but Nagato. And after that, Jiraiya would already tell them about three former students he had had. Yaeko, Konan and Nagato. Nagato being different from everyone, because he had the Rinnegan, although saying that as far as he knew, they three had died many years ago, but now he was very confused. But in the end, the Sannin ends up saying, "Itachi, I need to go to the lair. Firm Akatsuki, if it's about them, I should know," to which Itachi says, "If that's the way things are, then I'll go too. After all, I owe them one, besides they'll never expect a surprise attack, it won't be easy, but with some luck we'll be able to win," to which Naruto says, "Very well. Then come on, I'll go too, but Jiraiya says, I'm sorry Naruto, but it won't be like that, you have to go back to the village. It's very dangerous for you. Naruto would not accept this, so he would start arguing with Jiraiya, but the Sannin would not change his mind, and so after a minute, Jiraiya says, Naruto, I have something for you, and at that time, Jiraiya would hand Naruto the key to the fox seal. Although Naruto didn't understand anything, but Jiraiya says, that's the key to your seal. Once you manage to control the fox's power better, you will have to use it, so you can use all its power at your will. But you are not ready yet, you must continue training. That's why you must return to the village, because if we get to fail, I trust that you will be able to fulfill our mission. The information you know now is very important, and you must give it to Tsunade. That's why you can't come with us. If we fail, the future will depend on you, but don't worry, don't be sad, I'm not going to die. After all, if I did, Tsunade would kill me. But still, apologize to her. Tell her that she does not think that things they will end like this, but also tell her that I love her, and that she made me very happy these years, and you too. Thank you Naruto. Thank you for giving me a family. Maybe you think that we helped and saved you, but it was the other way around, you were the one who saved us, that's why you must live. So go, come back. Go back to the village, and wait for our return. Naruto couldn't believe what he was hearing, and tears were starting to come out of his eyes, while Jiraiya says, this is a Naruto mission. And as a blade ninja, you must fulfill this mission, so take this information to the Hokage. Do your duty as a ninja, and trust your companions. While Itachi says, Naruto, take care of Sasuke. I'm glad to know that my brother has a friend like you. Be the brother I couldn't be for him. But just at that moment, a voice is heard saying, wow, we finally found you, Itachi. It seems that what they told us was true, you really are a traitor. Well, that doesn't matter. After all, we're here for your head, and we'll take down anyone who gets in the way. And at that moment, Haiden and Kakuzu would show themselves. Seeing them, Itachi says, wow, it's you guys. Haiden, Kakuzu, it seems that we are enemies now, to which Haiden says, he knew that sooner or later this would happen, after all. We would eliminate each other in the end. To which Kakuzu says, that doesn't matter, the only important thing here is the reward Kakuzu would receive. When I'm done with you, to what Itachi says, we'll see about that, but Jiraiya says, you're not alone this time, I'll help you. Let's finish them, but Naruto says, I'll do it too, let's finish them, but Jiraiya says, no. You have to go. This is your chance Naruto, don't do it. Do your duty, to which Naruto says, very well, but they better not die, and so Naruto would leave, but at the same time, he would start the battle, Haiden and Kakuzu against Deidara and Sasori. But Jiraiya and Itachi had the advantage of knowing En's abilities. This is thanks to the time that Itachi had spent in Akatsuki. So they knew that they could not let them get hurt or else it would be the end of them. And so the battle would begin however, this one would be very even, since both Itachi and Jiraiya would be taking great care in the battle. Which is why they would try to keep their distance. On the other hand, Naruto was moving on his way. However, as he moved forward, he would be wondering if he had done the right thing, because as a ninja, he knew that he had to fulfill his mission. But deep down, I didn't want to say either. Jiraiya Itachi, because if something happened to them, he would never forgive them, and at that moment, he would remember that during his training with Kakashi, he had said some very important words to him. And after remembering this, Naruto says, it's true, Kakashi-sensei is right. And after that he turns around and continues on his way, but as he was going, he starts to gather Kiwi chakra. Because he thought to arrive with all his power. And so in the process, the chakra mantle would appear on him, whereby, not only his strength, but also his speed would increase. While on the other hand, Tsunade would be watching the sky, and while doing so, she says, I wonder how Naruto and Jiraiya will be. Jiraiya said to trust him, and Naruto left without saying anything, although good is typical of him, but once he comes back, I will punish him, he will have a lot of work to do. Sir, so you had better come back with well both of you. While on the other hand, by this time, Obito and Pain had finished sealing the three-tailed beast, which is why, Obito says, Setsu. Find out what Haiden and Kakusu's situation is, and let me know when they find Itachi. And so Setsu would leave, and after that a few more minutes would pass, and the battle between the two Akatsuki members, Haiden and Kakusu, against Hiraya and Tachi was still going on. However, Itachi was still not fully recovered, so he couldn't use all of his power, and because of this, since Haiden would let them greatly hurt his body, Itachi would be about to receive a big attack from Kakusu, but Hiraya would already get in the way and manage to save Itachi. But in return, the Sannin would receive Kakusu's attack. Seeing this, Itachi would ask him why he had done that, and the Sannin responds, "Because we are partners, but don't worry. This is nothing, I can still fight, we just have to be careful." But at that moment, Haiden would manage to take them by surprise, but before he managed to hurt either of them, Naruto would appear, managing to blow up the two enemies' friends, Hinata and Kakusu. This because he would manage to hit both of them with a Rasengan, because he had appeared with a Rasengan in each hand. Seeing this, both Hiraya and Itachi would be surprised, as they did not expect to see him, and the Sannin says, "But what are you doing here? You shouldn't be in this place," to which Naruto says, "I know, but someone once told me that those who break the rules are considered trash, but those who abandon their peers are worse than trash. That's why I don't intend to abandon them. No matter what happens, we will fight until the end, together." Hiraya is already surprised to hear that and says, "Thank you, Naruto, I think you've grown more than I thought, I'm proud of you. All right, then come on, let's get rid of them. Just remember to be careful not to get hurt." But at that moment, Haiden stands up and starts laughing, to after that say, "That attack hurt me, but it was worth it, since I managed to get some of your blood, just when you hit me I managed to make a small wound, and this is more than enough, get ready to die, boy." Everyone is surprised to hear that. Itachi says, "We must stop him, otherwise Naruto could die," but Kakusu would attack the Leaf Ninjas with a combined attack, which would give Haiden time to perform his ritual, but at the same time Naruto says, "Relax, I'm fine, I don't know. Worry about me, let's finish with them." And so the three of them would launch themselves against Haiden. However, Kakusu would get in the way, and while doing so, he says, "I'll buy time, you finish with that." And so now the three ninjas would face Kakusu, and due to the pressure they felt, he would manage to finish off Kakusu. He managed to take the first heart out of his. However, by doing this, they would take the opportunity to attack him with everything they had, thus taking Kakusu by surprise. And in a matter of a few moments, they would also manage to destroy the rest of their hearts, thus ending Kakusu. And after that, Naruto says, "Now let's go get him," but at that moment, Haiden starts laughing and then he says, "Wow. So they managed to finish him off, who knew? And I never thought I'd see him dead, but I'm glad. So I'll have more fun for me, now I'll finish with you." But at that moment, Naruto throws himself and hits him with a Rasengan, so Haiden would fly out, but despite this, Haiden would not stop laughing, while Naruto would feel a big blow on the body and says, "But what is this? Why is that?" But Itachi says, "Naruto, don't do that again. Haiden used the power of his skill on you, remember what I told you. So we must wait for the best time to act. Just stay calm, we should concentrate on preventing him from getting hurt." But Haiden says, "No matter what they do, and they will never be able to stop me," and after that, Haiden would start hurting himself, starting with going through his legs, using his sword, which would make Naruto feel great pain. The latter was suffering a lot, and Jiraiya seeing this, he would not take it anymore, so he would throw himself at Haiden, managing to catch and hold him, and while doing so, Jiraiya says, "I will not let you go through with this, you will not hurt," to Naruto, but Haiden laughs and then says, "It doesn't matter what you do. The boy is lost, there is no other choice, his life is mine," but while I was doing it, Itachi would be thinking of some way to help Naruto. However, after thinking for a few minutes, Itachi wouldn't find any way without hurting Naruto, so he wouldn't know what to do at that moment. However, Setsu had seen the situation, and when he did, he would inform Obito, who would recognize that this was his opportunity, so he would go to the place of the battle. And so a few more minutes would pass by this time. Jiraiya kept holding Haiden, but the latter says, "The more you think you can hold on like this, in the end I'm going to break free and finish with the guy, and then you two will be next. No one can against me, I'm immortal." To which Jiraiya says, "No matter what happens, I'm not going to let you hurt Naruto." But just at that moment, Madara would appear, and by doing so, he would take everyone by surprise, as he would bury a blade in Haiden's stomach, for which the latter starts laughing and says, "Well done, come on, keep it up." But Jiraiya says, "Who are you?" But Hitachi says, "You finally show up, Madara." Jiraiya is surprised to hear that, while Obito says, "We have to end this." And so this one would keep burying the blade in Haiden's stomach, although Jiraiya would not allow it. So he would free Haiden and launch himself against Madara. However, he couldn't do anything, as he would just go through it, and at that moment, he would remember everything Itachi had told him. But at the same time, because of what happened, Naruto was in pain, and he was on his knees with a lot of blood. However, Itachi says, "Master Jiraiya, I'll take care of Madara. You go get Haiden. We can still save Naruto." However, at that moment Madara would quickly take Haiden, and they would disappear, but only for a moment, because after a few seconds, these two would appear a few meters away. And at that moment Madara says, "It's time for us to end this," and so he would bury Haiden's own sword in his heart. But when doing so, Naruto would give a big scream, and then everything would be silence. Hirai could no longer believe what was happening, so he quickly went with Naruto, but when he arrived with him, it would be too late, because Naruto's body no longer had a pulse and his heart had stopped beating. Hirai couldn't believe it anymore, and tears would start coming out of his eyes, but at the same time he felt that Naruto's death had been his fault, because he hadn't been able to help him, while Madara says, "It's a pity, we'll have to wait for the Kyuubi to be reborn, although at least that way it will be easier to catch him. Now you will be next." But Hitachi says, "This will not stay like this, no. I don't care if I have to use all my power, or if I die in this place, I will finish with you." Naruto didn't have to die. And so Tachi, despite not being in his best state, would use the Mangekyo Sharingan, and then make the Susanoo appear. And after that launch himself against Madara and Haiden. However, Madara, knowing what could happen, would use Haiden as a shield. In this way, Madara would manage to avoid Itachi's attack, while Haiden would be pierced by the sword of Itachi's Susanoo. However, at that moment Haiden says, "That's your biggest attack, it's pathetic. I'm not even in pain, now you'll be next." But at that moment, Haiden would realize that he could not move Itachi. "It's useless, this is your end. This is the legendary sword Totsuka, and everything that goes through is sealed, therefore, this will be your end. Now you will suffer for eternity what you did to Naruto." And so Haiden would end up falling to the ground lifeless, while Madara says, "There is no doubt that you are amazing, however. That will not work with me." To which Itachi says, "I know, that's why I planned to finish you using my bare hands," and after that the Susanoo would disappear. And Tachi would throw himself against Madara, thus starting a new battle. But at the same time, Hirai would already keep apologizing to Naruto. However, after a few more moments like that, the Sannin says, "I swear I'll end this, rest Naruto." And so after that, the Sannin would summon the two old toads, Fukasaku and Shima, with whom he would enter into Sage mode. And once he was ready, Hirai would already launch himself against Madara because he had planned to finish with him. And thus a new battle would begin. However, Obito felt very confident. "Well, I didn't think they could touch him." But on the other hand, and without anyone noticing, Naruto's heart would start beating again. This thanks to the fox, and so Naruto would appear in front of him. Once there, the fox would make fun of him, telling him that he was pathetic, but also recognizing his great value. That was something he liked, but after that the fox would propose to make a deal, in which he would help him to come back to life, as well as lend him his power, but in exchange for that, he had to remove the cell that imprisoned him. Naruto would be surprised and didn't understand why he was doing it. But the fox responds by saying, "With what I have seen, I have realized that we are not so different, boy. Besides, I want to see how much you can do and how far you can go, but most of all I want you to finish with Madara Uchiha." Naruto is surprised to hear that, but he didn't trust at all. And he says, "Since I know you don't want to trick me into keeping my body," to which the fox says, "If I wanted to, I would have stayed with him instead of waking you up. But it's your choice, boy, do you want to stand up one more time, or are you planning to give up?" Naruto would feel safer hearing that. But at that moment, and to his surprise, he hears a voice saying, "You can trust him, Naruto, the fox is not as bad as you think." Naruto is surprised, and would ask who had said that, but at that moment his surprise would increase, as the fourth Hokage would appear in front of him. Naruto couldn't believe it and says, "Wait a minute, it's you," but the fox says, "Minato, you shouldn't say those things. You're lucky I'm here, otherwise I'd end up with you." But Minato laughs and then says, "You don't have to pretend, remember that I have a part of you inside me." And after that, Minato looks directly into Naruto's eyes and says, "I had been waiting for this moment a lot. You don't know how glad I am to be able to meet you, Naruto." And so these two would have a very similar encounter to the original story, in which Naruto would be very happy to meet his father. But besides that, Minato would tell him the one who had trusted him so that he could stop the subject. Masked, for he had been the culprit of the fox's attack on the village all those years ago. Naruto couldn't believe it, but after that, Minato would tell him that he was proud of him and the ninja he had become. In addition to telling him to thank Jiraiya and Tsunade for his part, as well as to congratulate them on being together, as it made him happy to see his teacher happy. And after that I would talk some more with Naruto, and just when Minato's chakra was about to run out, Minato says, "Naruto, there is still someone else who is waiting for you, and when you see her tell her that I love her. This is goodbye, son, but never forget that I am proud of you and that I trust you." And so after that, Minato would disappear, and Naruto would stay in front of the fox's cell. Naruto would watch her for a few moments, and after that, Naruto would open the seal of the fox. In this way the cell would disappear. And when they were face to face, Naruto says, "What will you do?" But the fox ends up putting his fist in front of Naruto and says, "If you trust me, I could do the same, boy." Naruto smiles when he hears it and then claps his fist with the fox's, managing to connect. However, at that moment everything would change for Naruto, because he would appear in another place. He doesn't know what was going on or where he was, he says, "But since I got here, I've never seen anything like it." But at that moment, a woman appears in front of him and says, "Naruto, I had been waiting for this moment. It's good to see you, son." Naruto couldn't believe it, but he would manage to recognize the woman and says, "Mom, it's really you." And he would quickly jump in and hug her. But while this was happening, the battle between Jiraiya and Itachi against Madara was still going on. On the one hand, Naruto's encounter with Kushina would be the same as the original story, while Jiraiya and Itachi faced Madara. But this was a very tough enemy, especially because of his ability that did not allow that. They touched him, and this was complicating everything for them. However, after a few more minutes, both Jiraiya and Itachi had an idea of what to do against Madara, and both of them, without saying a single word, would know what the other was thinking. This is because being two ninjas of such a high level, they thought they knew the same, and so the two would attack Madara together. The latter was very confident, so he did not expect what was about to happen, and after some attacks together, both would manage to take Madara by surprise, managing to cut her on the arm. The latter would be surprised, recognizing that he had let down his guard, but that it would not happen again, while Jiraiya and Itachi would recognize that he had figured out how to manage to hurt him, so these two were ready to finish with him. And so the battle would begin once more. But unlike before, now it would be more intense, so, little by little Madara would begin to receive more wounds on her body, which she could not understand. And because of this, Obito would not be concentrating at all, so he would end up getting a big hit on the mask, which would cause the mask to be dead. And so his face would end up revealing itself, and when he sees it, Itachi says, "Wait a minute, you're not Madara Uchiha. Who are you really?" But Jiraiya, who would manage to recognize him, says, "Wait a minute, I know you, but how is this possible? I thought you were dead, what is it? What does this mean?" To which Obito replies, "It's been a long time, I didn't expect them to manage to do this, they have surprised me. But now that they know, I can't let them leave this place alive." To which Itachi says, "You know him, who is he?" And Jiraiya responds, "His name is Obito. Obito Uchiha is the one who gave the Sharingan to Kakashi. I knew him a long time ago. When he was just a genin, he, like Kakashi, were students of Minato, the fourth Hokage. I knew them because I was his teacher, but as far as I knew, Obito had died on a mission. I'm sure even Kakashi doesn't know this." Itachi would be very surprised, because he would never have imagined that this was the story of that guy who pretended to be Madara. But Obito says, "That doesn't matter anymore, just like who I am. After all, Obito is dead, and I'm just someone with a purpose, and that's why I can't fail. I will finish with you." And so Obito throws himself against Jiraiya. However, before he could do anything, only a yellow ray would be seen. And Obito would be taken by surprise and hit by a Rasengan, for which Obito would have. He had fallen to the ground, while Jiraiya says, "Wait a minute, that was it, Minato, but how is that possible?" But by observing well, he would see that it was Naruto, which would leave him with a smile on his face, and then he says, "Naruto, really? It's you, but how is that possible? What was it that happened?" While Kaitachi says, "Naruto, I'm glad to see you're okay, but what's that look like?" To which Naruto says, "This is my power when the Kyuubi and I join forces. We're working together now, but besides, we can't let Obito get away with this. After all, he is the culprit of my parents' death, as well as the culprit of the Kyuubi attack years ago." Jiraiya and Tachi are surprised, as well as would ask him how he knew that, and Naruto replies that his father had told him, which would leave them even more surprised. But after that, Naruto would give Jiraiya his father's message. This would leave the Sannin happy, while Obito would manage to stand up and says, "That's right, I was behind that. All this time I've always been me, but they can't stop me. You are no match for me, and now I will show you all my power. I will finish with you," while Naruto says, "I won't let you get away with it. I'm sorry, but I must finish with you," and so Naruto would launch against Obito, while the latter would also attack him. However, Jiraiya and Tachi would also throw themselves, and so the three ninjas of the hour would confront Obito, because they did not think to let him get away with it. Everyone would use all their power and everything they had, but due to the numerical superiority and Naruto's new power, Obito would not have a chance and would end up going down badly. Hurt, Obito had lost, and he knew it, for which, and to everyone's surprise, Obito ends up apologizing, confessing that he had only done all this to see Rin again, the girl he loved. Everyone would be surprised, and even Naruto would end up forgiving him, telling him that if he was really sorry and wanted to change, he could still do it, and this one could help him. Obito could not believe what he was hearing, doubting Naruto, because this was the culprit of the death of his parents. Naruto would acknowledge this, but he would still forgive him, saying that we all make mistakes, and while that was a painful thing for him, he knew that he was important to his parents, and that they would forgive him, so he did too. Obito would be extremely surprised by Naruto's words, and some tears would come out of his eyes, but just then, and to everyone's surprise, Setsu would appear saying, "There is no doubt that you are a failure, you always were, that's why Madara always doubt you, in the end, you were always a loser." And after that, Setsu would end Obito's life, and then he says, "This time they managed to win, but not yet. It doesn't end. Next time you'll be ours, Kyugi. No one can stop me." And after that, Setsu would leave. This would leave the Leaf Ninjas surprised, because they did not expect this. Besides, now they had more doubts than before, but at that time Hitachi says, "Although someone gives, pain remains, by possessing the Rinnegan, he is the most dangerous Akatsuki," to which Jiraiya responds, "Still, I can't help but think that I know who it can be about. But in our current state, we are not rivals, it is best that we rest and recover. For them it's time to return to the village of the leaf," to which Itachi, "Then it's time to separate," but Jiraiya says, "Come with us. If you don't want to come to the village, you can stay on the outskirts as we had said. You will be safe there, and you will be able to recover without problems." And so after chatting a little more about this, Itachi would end up accepting. And so the three of them would start their way back to the Land of Fire, and the village of the leaf. But on the other hand, Setsu would appear in front of Nagato and says, Madara has fallen to the hands of the fox Hinchiriki, Hiraya, and the Itachi traitor in the end. And they managed to surprise him, as the Hinchiriki managed to control the fox's power. To which Nagato says, wow, that's really unexpected, now it's all up to us. But in the end, no matter how much you are or the power you have, no one is a match for pain. I will show you the power of a god. I will use my Rinnegan to show them that they can do nothing but accept their fate and fall before me. Konan, we have to move, we will finish them and their village once and for all. And so, Konan and Nagato would start moving, as they wanted to be close to the Leaf Village. Well, that way Nagato would have a better control of pain, since he planned to use all his power in the next battle. And for that he wanted to be inside the country of fire. While Yusetsu once would be alone, he tells himself, Obito may have fallen, but in the end, the only one who matters is you Nagato. Whether you manage to fulfill the mission, or you fail, in the end, you will bring Madara back to life, and no one will be able to stop him. My plan will not fail, Kaguya will come back one way or another, and I will make sure of it. And already after that a few days would pass, Naruto, Hirai, Itachi, before reaching the village of the Leaf, they would arrive at a small house on the outskirts of the village, and once there, Hiraiya says, here you can stay, Itachi, no one comes to this place, to which Naruto says, I never imagined there was a house here. While Itachi says, neither do I. I had hardly seen her before, she must not have much time, but Jiraiya replies, you're wrong, this house is older than you. This is where I trained Minato a long time ago. Naruto is surprised, and would ask if that was true, as well as wanting to know more about his father. But Hirai already answers, we'll talk later, now we don't have much time, but as I said, you can rest here. And I'll come later to bring you food, you can trust me, and Tachi appreciates this and reminds Naruto not to say anything to Sasuke. Naruto reminds him of the promise he had made to him, and after that, Hiraya and Naruto leave now towards the village of the Leaf. While Itachi would see how they were moving away, but at the same time, in the distance he would see the village of the Leaf, and says, after such a long time, I am here once again, and I have the opportunity to come back, but I can't do it. I have already made my way and my decision. I have to stand my ground, for Sasuke's sake, it's the least I can do for him. At least, I finally see the end of the road, soon I will be able to rest. And already after that a few minutes would pass and at last, Hiraya and Naruto would be back in the village of the Blade, and once there, the first thing they would do would be to meet with Tsunade, who would be very happy to see them well. Although after that, Tsunade would start scolding them, especially Naruto, whom she would end up punishing, but Hirai already finishes saying, don't worry, you should be grateful to him. If it hadn't been for Naruto, we would have died. He saved us, so it's good that he went. In addition, he managed to master the power of the fox, to which Tsunade says, wait a minute, you said, he saved us. Who else did he save? What was it that happened? Who were they with and why isn't he here? Hear that person, to which Jiraiya says, well, maybe it's a little complicated to understand, but you must trust me. And then Jiraiya would tell Tsuna about everything that had happened, and how he had met with Itachi, as well as the one who had let him escape in the attack on the village a long time ago. Tsunade couldn't understand this, since Itachi was a criminal, and the Hokage was asking him how he could trust him, but Jiraiya says, there's something else you should know about Itachi like that. Jiraiya would tell Tsunade the truth about Itachi, leaving the Hokage totally shocked and speechless. While Naruto would confirm everything said by Hiraya, as well as that they could trust Itachi. Despite this, Tsunade would have doubts, as this was very different from everything she had heard from Itachi all these years. However, after a few moments of silence, Tsunade says, since you say so, I will trust. But if at any time Itachi proves me otherwise, or tries to hurt someone, I will end up with himself using my bare hands. Jiraiya and Naruto would accept this, but after that, Jiraiya says, go get some rest. Naruto, you deserve it, eat something and get ready, we don't know when the next battle will be, but we have to be ready. And so Naruto would leave, and once alone, Hirai already tells Tsunade, come with me, it's time for you to go with Itachi. It will be better if Naruto is not there. Also, there is something else, it's about Pain, the last remaining Akatsuki, because I think I know who it can be about. And if I'm not mistaken, I took care of him in the past and trained him. Tsunade is surprised to hear that and would ask how that was possible, but Jiraiya says, I'll tell you on the way. Now let's go with Itachi, and so these two would advance towards the house where Itachi was. While on the other hand, Naruto would be eating ramen in the Ishiraku, but once there, he would meet Hinata, Sasuke and Sakura, who would ask for him since he had disappeared. He appeared for several days, and Naruto would tell them that he had been on an important mission, although he almost got out when he said that he had been with Itachi. However, at the last moment he had managed to control himself, and he would change the name, and then he would change the subject quickly. For a few moments later, I would march from place at full speed. This would be a rare thing for Team 7, but they wouldn't take much notice of it either. And after that, the team would split up. Sasuke would advance on his own path to train, while Sakura and Hinata would advance on the other side. And after a few moments, Jiraiya and Tsunade would arrive with Itachi, to whom they would bring food. And Tsunade would help him using her medical ninjutsu. In addition to that, there the Hokage would have a talk with Itachi, with which he wanted to check what Naruto and Jiraiya had told him. But at the end, Tsunade ends up telling him, I'm sorry, it's a pity that things were like this, but glad to know that we are counting on you, Itachi. I do not know how much time we have left, but we have to work together and finish with Akatsuki, to which Itachi says, count on me. I will give everything of myself. Tsunade smiles when she hears that and after. Well, he says, Jiraiya will stay with you in this place, so you'll be safe in case someone comes, to which Jiraiya says, hey wait. When you made that decision, I just came back, I was hoping to spend time with you, to which Tsunade says, I know, me too, but I am now. It's more important, and once it's over, we'll take a break. Hirai already smiles when he hears that and Tsunade would give him a kiss, to then leave the place and wish him luck. And already after that a couple of days would pass. In the village of La Jolla, things had been very quiet. Naruto was secretly training with Jiraiya Itachi, because he wanted to learn how to master the power of the Kiwi. Because he wanted to be ready for the final battle against Akatsuki. However, after a week, yes, Sakura and Hinata would manage to see Naruto around the village, acting kind of weird. So they would start following him, however in the process, the girls would run into Sasuke, which is why they would ask if they didn't know where Naruto was going, since he was acting weird, but Sasuke didn't know anything either. So he would join his companions, and the three of them would advance behind Naruto. And after a couple of minutes, Naruto would arrive at a house, which was deep in the forest, but when he saw him enter there, the three of them, Sasuke, Sakura and Hinata, would wonder what he was doing there, because it was a very strange place, but some moments later, he would be seen leaving along with Jiraiya. This would make Team 7 calm down, because they would think it was a Jiraiya house, but at that moment, they would hear Naruto say, come on, get out, I know I can still get stronger, and I need the help of both of you, and right after. To say that, Itachi comes out of the house and says, I'm ready now, but seeing him, the three members of Team 7 would be totally paralyzed and surprised. Well, they'd be watching Itachi, along with Naruto. And a few moments later, Sasuke says, this will not stay like this, and he would quickly throw himself against Itachi. But while he was doing it, Sasuke would do the Kidori and says, I don't know what's going on here, but I'll finish you, Itachi. Upon seeing Sasuke, everyone is surprised, but Naruto would quickly intervene, using the chakra mode for a moment, and managing to stop Sasuke, but being in front of life. To the front, Sasuke says, what is it that you do? Because you stopped me, Naruto. It's Itachi, it's my brother, you know what he did, he's to blame for me being alone. I'm done with my family, with my clan, he deserves to pay for that. So let me go, I'll finish him, but Naruto says, wait, I can't let you do that. Everyone is surprised to hear that, but Naruto says, old Jiraiya, Itachi, get out of this place, I'll stay with Sasuke. You can leave this to me, everything will be fine. To which Itachi says, are you sure? You know what? But Naruto plays him. He interrupts by saying, you know I don't agree with that, but still, I'll keep my word. Also, remember that you still need to help us take down Akatsuki. Once we do that, we'll see what to do, so leave now. So Jiraiya and Itachi leave, while Sasuke would be out, furious, and would try to stop Itachi, but he could not free himself from Naruto, who had him trapped. And Naruto says, "It's useless, you'd better calm down and listen to me." But Sasuke, being so upset, would end up attacking Naruto, although he wouldn't manage to do anything to him, but thanks to this, Naruto would take his distance and Sasuke says, "I thought you were my friend, I thought I could trust you, but I realized my mistake. So if you plan to stop me, I'll have to finish you first." And so Sasuke would throw himself against Naruto, but the latter says, "Very well, if you want it that way. Then I'll have to make you understand the hard way." However, at that moment, seeing that they were about to start a battle, Sakura and Hinata would appear, as they both wanted to stop them. However, Naruto says, "Don't worry, we'll be fine. This is something we have to do, just trust us." And so the battle between Naruto and Sasuke would begin. Although on the other hand, Jiraiya and Itachi had already moved away, and at that moment Itachi says, "I'm sorry to cause trouble. Everything would be easier if I had faced Sasuke, so he would have finished with me and everything. All this could have been avoided," to which Jiraiya says, "I've heard a lot of things about you, especially about your great skills. So I find it hard to believe that you would say something like that. Well, even you should know that it's not a good idea, although of course, I'm not going to try to change your mind, after all. You have already made your decision, but still, you have to take advantage of the time you have, so think about it well. It's really what you want to do, this may be your last chance." And so after hearing that, Itachi would start looking at the sky and think about Jiraiya's words. And so some hours would pass, and by this time, the battle between Naruto and Sasuke had come to an end. And although Naruto had not used all his power, the two boys were on the ground, and Naruto says, "You are stronger then. I remembered, I'm surprised. It looks like you've been training really hard," to which Sasuke says, "Why Naruto? Why are you doing this? Why were you with Itachi? Why did you protect him? What is it that happened to you? What is your relationship with him? Why didn't you let me finish him off?" To which Naruto says, "I'm sorry, I know what this means to you, but I couldn't do. Certain things happen these days, and everything has changed. I even tried to finish him, but now I realize how good it was not to do it. Since we need him. He is the only one who knows the last member of Akatsuki, and possibly the most powerful, since he possesses the Rinnegan. The greatest power of this world. That's why we need Itachi, but you can rest easy. Once we manage to find Akatsuki and finish with them, Itachi will be yours. It's a promise, but until that time comes, I'd like you to think it over. You really want to end him, after all, he is your brother." But Sasuke says, "No, my brother died in the attack on my clan. My brother died with everyone, and Itachi is a monster and my duty is to end him. I have nothing to think about, so that you'd better hide it because next time, I'll end up with him." After that, Sasuke would stand up and leave, while Naruto would just watch him walk away and say, "I'm sorry," but on the other hand, Sakura would go after Sasuke, while Hinata would ask Naruto what was going on. Because everything was very strange, to which Naruto says, "I know it's complicated, but I can't say anything. I really would like to," but Hinata says, "Naruto, you can trust me. No matter what it is, we are partners, and we are there to support each other. You have helped us a lot, so the least I can do is help you, besides, knowing life. Since he's had Sasuke, if you're doing this, you must have some motive behind it, don't you?" To which Naruto says, "You're very smart. Hinata, you keep surprising me. All right, I'll tell you, but you can't say anything to anyone, much less Sasuke," to which Hinata replies, "Answer, count on it, you can trust me, and I would never betray you. You are very important to me, so I will not fail you." Naruto is surprised to hear that. Besides, seeing Hinata's eyes would feel something weird, but after a few seconds, Naruto, "Yes, I can trust you, very well, I'll tell you," and then Naruto would tell Hinata the truth about Itachi and everything that had happened with Akatsuki. Hinata would be very surprised to hear everything that Naruto had said, but now she understood it more, so she ends up saying, "Now I understand everything. Well, no matter what happens, you have my support, whatever you choose, I will be by your side. Naruto thanks for this, but then he ends up saying, it's already a little late, it'll be better to have something to eat. How about we go have a ramen? Me and Mito, Hinata is surprised and glad to hear. And so these two would advance towards Ishiraku. Although on the other hand, not far from the Leaf Village, there were Nagato, Pain, Konan and Setsu. These were hidden in a paper tree created by Konan, and once there, Nagato says, alright, it's time to start. The attack, the time has come to finishing with the traitor of Hitachi, as well as capturing the Nine Tails. No one will be able to prevent us from achieving our goal. And after that, Nagato would send the 6 paths of pain to the Leaf Village, while secretly Setsu called himself Sasimi. Even, no matter what they do, they will not be able to stop the power of the Rinnegan. My victory is certain, no one will be able to prevent the rebirth of Kaguya. And already after that a few hours would pass and the night would arrive. By this time, Naruto was with Hinata. Both were watching her quietly from the top of Mount Hokage. Also, Sasuke was training. And along with him was Sakura, who would only be watching him, but on the other hand, Kakashi was with Tsunade, who had told him everything that was happening, leaving him very surprised. Especially because of the knowledge that Obito had been behind a lot of things that had happened, and that he had really been alive, and being a big criminal, so this would be something hard for Kakashi. While on the other hand, Hirai was already meeting with Itachi. These two would be talking about Sasuke and Naruto, as well as about the Leaf Village, but at that time, the third Hokage would appear, saying that he had talked to Tsunade, but after that, Hiruzen would apologize to Itachi, since he had never wanted him to suffer from this way. Everything seemed very quiet in the village for everyone. It seemed like just another night in the village. While Naruto would be thanking Hinata for having spent these moments with him, since it's been a while since he had such a quiet time. Which is why he felt happy being with her, and this would make Hinata blush. She was in love with Naruto. And so, after a few moments of silence, Hinata says, thank you for letting me be with you, Naruto. But, the truth is, there's something I've been wanting to tell you for a long time. However, just as Hinata was saying this, the 6 paths of Peace Synavian manages to enter the Leaf Village. And at that moment they would start their attack, starting with the appearance of giant beasts, as well as the destruction of the village. Therefore, everything would change from one second to the next, creating a lot of destruction everywhere. And Naruto seeing this says, this cannot be, this must be the work of Akatsuki, this I will not forgive them, I will finish with them. And so Naruto would advance along with Hinata through the village. Likewise, Tsunade says, it seems that they managed to infiltrate. We must stop them. But also to help people, to what Kaka. And he says, I will do everything I can, and so this one would advance in search of the enemy. On the other hand, Sasuke seeing this, says, he knew that they could not trust him. This must be Itachi's doing. This time I will finish with him, and so Sasuke would advance, while Sakura would not leave him alone, and would advance. Behind, also Jiraiya, Itachi and Hiruzen also knew that it was the work of Akatsuki, so the three would advance towards the village. Although on the way, Hiruzen would give an Ambua Hunter mask to Itachi, since that would be easier for him to be in the village. While Ketsunade would use Katsuyu to help the civilians, as well as send the Ambu Hunters and the rest of the ninjas into battle, and help the people of the village. The most important thing was to avoid losing lives. And already after that a few minutes would pass on the one hand, Kakashi. And he would meet Eva's way, while on the other, Naruto and Hinata would meet the Asura way. But Sasuke and Sakura would meet the Naraka way. Sasuke, seeing that it wasn't about Itachi Dice, I must say that I was hoping you were someone else, but I'll be done with him later. Now I will finish with you first. While Naruto says, you must be Pain, the leader of Akatsuki. I will not forgive you for this. I will finish with you, but the way Azura says, you will come with us. Kyugi, but on the other hand, Eva's way would recognize Kakashi, as well as his great skill, but after that he says, no matter what you do, I will finish you, so you better give up, but Kakashi would not give up, and so at the same time. These three battles would start, while the human way, the animal way and the predator way, were making destruction on all sides. But knowing that the Asura way had met Naruto, these last 3 roads would advance towards him because Naruto was his main target. However, during their journey, these 3 would end up encountering different ninjas, whom they would manage to defeat. But before they ended their lives, Gamabunta would appear and they were on top of him. Jiraiya, Hiruzen and Tachi. But seeing the large number of beasts that were in the village, Jiraiya would summon more toads like this. While his toads faced the beasts, he, along with his teacher Itachi, would face the 3 roads in front of them, thus starting a new battle. But while all this was happening, Nagato says, "They are all in the village. It seems that the battle will be tougher than I thought," to which Konan says, "What do you plan to do? You want me to go," but Setsu says, "Have no mercy, show them your power, you can't stop now, we're so close to getting peace. We can't let anyone interfere in our way," to which Nagato says, "That's true," and after that, Nagato says, "I have to use that power," but while he was saying that, 5 of Pain's 6 paths had fallen in battle. And now everyone was looking for the last path, and after a few minutes, everyone would reach the place where he found Kakashi facing Eva's path by wearing the mask. Sasuke would not be aware of Itachi's presence. But at the same time, Hirai would already be able to recognize Yaki's body, so he would ask him what had happened to it, as well as how he had gotten the Rinnegan and where Nagato and Konan were. But the way of Basolo would say, "You are very late. Late, Jiraiya-sensei," and after that, I would take everyone by surprise using the Shinra Tensei, so everyone would fly out. But after that, Pain says, "This is my chance," and then I would use the Chibaku Tensei, so throwing a black sphere to the sky, and moments later, the ground and everything around it would begin to rise, creating a large sphere made of rocks in the sky. Seeing this, everyone would be shocked, while Jiraiya says, "It is said that the Sage of the 6 Paths created the moon a long time ago. There is no doubt that he is trying to do something similar. The power of the Rinnegan is amazing," to which Itachi, who due to Pain's attack, says, "No matter what he's doing, we have to stop him." But Sasuke, upon seeing his brother, lunges at him. However, when standing right in front of him, Itachi stops his hands and says, "Sasuke, it's not the time now, we must stop that guy and stop him from destroying the village. I know how you must feel. But we'll settle the score later. The only thing that matters now is to stop this." Sasuke is surprised to hear this, but seeing his brother's eyes, for a moment he would see Litaki, that I had met so many years ago, and so he ends up saying, "All right, you'll have a little more time, but once this is over, I'll finish with you." To which Itachi says, "I hope so." And after that, they would quickly analyze the situation, and Itachi would quickly have an idea of how to try to stop Pain's power, although I wasn't sure if it would work, but they had no choice. However, just when everyone was ready to start the plan, the ground where they were starts to rise, which is why Jiraiya says, "We don't have time. I'm sure if that catches us, it will be our end." To which Naruto says, "Then let's not waste time." And after saying that, Naruto would go into Kurama mode. But seeing this, Pain says, "I will finish with you." And at that moment he would make Naruto and everyone else get attacked by giant rocks. However, seeing this, Itachi says, "We must protect Naruto, now everything depends on him." To which Naruto says, "I will not fail." And so Itachi, using his Susanoo, would protect Naruto, as well as the others, while the rest destroyed the rocks that were approaching. And finally, Naruto, who was transformed, would gather a large amount of chakra in order to launch a giant Vijudama. And once ready, Naruto would launch his attack against the sphere that was being created, but Itachi seeing this, he would also launch an attack with his Susanoo and Gran. Thanks to this great combination, the sphere and the Chivikutensei would be destroyed. Nagato and Pain couldn't believe what had happened. They had underestimated their enemies. But at the same time, Itachi would have spent a lot of chakra, and due to his state of health, he would start falling to the ground. Naruto would try to help him, but Sasuke seeing him says, "Leave it to me, you go get the Akatsuki," and so this would save his big brother, while Naruto along with Jiraiya would throw themselves against Eva's path, which he knew he had lost. And it was useless to continue the battle. However, before anything, Eva's way says, "This is not over yet," to which Jiraiya says, "I know." And then he would hit Eva's way with a Rasengan, thus putting him out of battle. And after that, Naruto and Jiraiya would start checking Eva's path body, while Nagato says, "Who knew? I didn't think it would come to this moment, but I have no choice, it's my turn to fight. And I'm not going to lose," to which Setsu says, "Well said, show them all your power, release all your hatred against them." However, Konan wasn't sure about all this, but most of all, he didn't trust Setsu. Also, after investigating for a moment, Hirai would already believe that the black bars served to control the body, these being chakra receptors. And hearing that, Naruto would have an idea and bury one of them. Jiraiya would be surprised, but after doing so and being in chakra mode, Naruto would manage to discover the place where the one who controlled pain was, for which Naruto says, "I did it, I know where they are. It's not very far from here. This is our chance, man." Jiraiya would be shocked to know this, while Nagato says, "Wow, the Kiwi Hinchiriki is more skilled than I thought, they will be here soon. So we need to get ready." But on the other hand, Naruto goes to Itachi and asks him how he is, to which Itachi, who was with Sasuke, says, "Relax, it's all okay, but the time has come. You know well that sooner or later this would come, so I just want you to know that it was nice to meet you, Naruto, and above all, don't forget the promise you made to me." And hearing that, Naruto remembers how Itachi had asked him two things. The first, he didn't say. To tell his brother the truth about him, and the Uchigas, and the second, to take care of him, help him, and be for him. And so after thinking about this, Naruto ends up saying, "I always keep my promises, Sasuke, now you can do whatever you want. It's your decision, but never forget that despite everything, you are my friend." After that, Naruto tells the others, "Now I will go for the real leader of Akatsuki. That's why it's better for them to stay here. It can be dangerous, but also if the village becomes in danger, it will need you. So I trust you and be calm. I'm not going to fail," but at that moment, Hinata stands in front of him and says, "You better come back with okay," and after that, she gives him a kiss. Naruto smiles and ends by saying, "It will be so," while Jiraiya says, "It's time, Naruto, we can't waste any more time." To which Naruto says, "I know." But Tsunade appears saying, "You too, Jiraiya, you better come back, well both of you. Since I don't know what I would do if something happens to you," to which Jiraiya says, "Don't worry, we'll be back, but most of all, you know I would never let anything happen to Naruto," while the latter says, "Thanks for everything, Grandma. We'll be back, that's a promise." And so Jiraiya and Naruto move on their way, while Kaitachi tells Sasuke, "This is your chance, finish with me, I have no chakra left. So don't waste your time, Sasuke." He finishes with this, but Sasuke says, "Before we do it, we have to talk," and so Sasuke walks away together with his brother. And already after that a few minutes would pass, and by this time, Itachi, after everything that happened, he would ask Sasuke for forgiveness for everything, but he would also tell him that he was proud of him. However, in saying this, Itachi, if he ended up losing his life, as his body had reached the limit, Sasuke would be very surprised by all this. He was very confused, but above all, he could not help crying, because despite everything, the death of his brother had been something very hard for him. While on the other hand, Jiraiya and Naruto would finally arrive at the place where Nagato, Konan and Setsu were, so they would both enter the tree, but when they did, they would meet Nagato and Konan, who were waiting for them and ready to fight. However, upon seeing them, Jiraiya says, "So you two are the ones behind everything, Konan, Nagato," to which the latter says, "You're wrong. Konan is with me because he trusts that I can create a new world, a world where there are no wars, where everyone can live in peace. That's why she's with me," to which Jiraiya says, "Do you really think this is peace? Do you know how many people have suffered because of all this?" To which Nagato says, "The only way to achieve peace is by knowing pain, loss, suffering, and now we are very close to achieving that goal. I just give up." In Dan's turn yourself in, Kyugi, and if they do, I promise no one else will suffer. But Jiraiya would try to convince Nagato not to go through with all this, as well as tell him about Obito, trying to make him see that they had only been manipulated. However, this would only make that Nagato would get upset and end up starting with his attack, but Konan, who had been having doubts for a while, would get in the way, saving his teacher, for which Nagato would stop his attack because he could not understand nor believe this. It would leave Nagato very confused and with a lot of doubts. However, Setsu would show up to try to convince Nagato to go through with his plan, trying to manipulate him into believing that Konan was betraying him. However, at that moment, Naruto would intervene, who would try to make Nagato open his eyes and see things as they really are. However, Setsu would keep trying to manipulate Nagato, to the point where he would manage to take Konan, Jiraiya, and Naruto by surprise, managing to trap them with roots created by his body, and in doing so, Setsu says, "It's our time, finish with them, and let's capture the Kyugi. Come on, Nagato, this is our chance. Come on Nagato, we are so close to achieving our plan." This would leave Nagato very surprised, and he wouldn't know what to do. However, the three of them, Jiraiya, Konan and Naruto, would try to make Nagato react once more, but the latter, Timo, was very confused. He didn't know what to do. However, after listening to Naruto, Konan and Jiraiya, he would remember how he was before, as well as think about Yeko, so at that moment, tears come out of Nagato's eyes. And this one says, "I'm sorry." And after that I would use the Shinra-tensei, with which I would take Setsu by surprise and send him flying, but when doing this, the three of them, Jiraiya, Konan and Naruto, smile, and after that, Naruto says, "I'll take care of the rest," and after firm that he uses the chakra mode and throws himself against Setsu saying, "This is for everything you have provoked. You will pay for everything," and so Naruto would unleash all his power against Setsu, who would have no chance against him. And so Setsu would lose his life, while Nagato would apologize for everything he had done, acknowledging that he had made a mistake. But for Jiraiya, Konan and Naruto, this was not a problem, because for the three of them, knowing that Nagato had having made the right decision was enough, because now he could correct his path. And after that, these four would have a long talk, in which Nagato would end up placing his trust in Naruto, although he did not plan to give up, since now he wanted to help his village in a right way, just as he wanted to do in the past. And already after that a few hours would pass, and by this time, Konan and Nagato would leave, but not before promising to see Jiraiya again and Naruto. While the latter two, they were finally calm, because Akatsuki had disappeared, besides that everything had ended well with Nagato and Konan. So now they only had one thing to do: return to the Leaf Village with Tsunade. And already after that 2 weeks would pass. By this time, things were very quiet for everyone. Naruto was with Hinata, Sasuke, Sakura and Kakashi. These were Team 7, and they were about to start a new mission. For now all was at peace, and all had ended well. Also, Nagato and Konan were in their village, and both were working to create a better place, as well as help all the people in their village. On the other hand, Hirai was already with Tsunade, and the 5th Hokage says, "Everyone has accepted, it won't be easy. But it's the first step so that, to achieve a peace between all the great nations," to which Jiraiya says, "I'm proud of you," to which Tsunade says, "Without you and without Naruto, this would not be possible, but it's not over yet. We have to work hard if you want to achieve peace."